Well, the measure of a man. How do you measure a man? It's kind of intriguing when you think of it. If you go back into the book of 1 Samuel, the 16th chapter, you see there that God directed Samuel to select the next one who would serve as king, and he would anoint him. And naturally, as he goes back, he's got some preconceived ideas about who to select to go to the household of Jesse. And he looks, and he sees the oldest one, the oldest son. And he goes, this is the one. I mean, he's got the look. He's got the size. I mean, he's the quintessential man. And surely this is the one God wants me to anoint. God said, no, not him. And we would sit back if we were there and go, why not? I mean, he's got it all. What's not to like about it? But God said no. While you're there in the 16th chapter, go down to verse 11. Samuel said to Jesse, are these all the children? And he said, there remains yet the youngest. Behold, he is tending the sheep. Samuel said to Jesse, well, send and bring him, for we will not sit down until he comes here. So he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy, with beautiful eyes and a handsome appearance. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is he. Wow. They're talking about David. But to kind of use the vernacular of the day, he was the run of the litter. I mean, yes, he had the blue eyes. Intriguing. The other day I went and had my eyes fitted for new glasses. And, they take pictures of them. They showed me my eyes. And I thought, man, what amazing blue eyes I have. I thought, man, these are great eyes. And I speak in jest. We look at so many different things of people and think that this is the one, based solely on appearance. And it was said that David was a man after God's own heart in the book of Acts, the 13th chapter, and verse 22. But see, that's the thing. God searches the heart. And that's what God was looking at with regards to David. Not the externals, but he was looking deeper, richer, fuller. He was looking for the totality of the measure of the man who would be his king, upon whom the seed would come ultimately. And it would be from the tribe of Jesse, through David. And upon David's throne would the Messiah sit. God looked at the heart, the thoughts, the intentions, all those things. Does that mean that David was perfect? We know he wasn't. We know that he stumbled, he fell, and he fell mightily. But he pulled himself up, and he began to serve God in a manner consistent with what God would have him and want him to do. And that's the importance of what we're looking at. That man misjudged David. They underestimated him. But it wasn't just Samuel. His brothers underestimated him. But even if you go to the 17th chapter of 1 Samuel, and you drop down at verse 42, you see somebody else misjudged him. When the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Then the Philistine also said to David, Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky, the beasts of the field. We're talking about Goliath. He said, what do you think of me? I'm a dog, a cur dog? How dare you? And you're the one that's going to fight me and put me down? Oh, no, I think not. And when I was thinking of this, I was thinking of the basketball player, Muggsy Bogues. Muggsy Bogues, 5'3", whatever 5'3" is. Maybe he was 5'6". He wasn't 6 foot. And there's no way he could even lie about it. But Muggsy Bogues had a really remarkable career in the NBA. Going against 7-footers. Going against guys that were considerably taller and stronger than him. And one of the things I remember in an interview, he said, they overlook me. They overlook me. They don't consider me a threat. And he was a threat to them. And he would weave in and around them. And he would score. He would pass off. He was an amazing basketball player. And this is kind of what's going on. David is in the land of a giant. And he said, I will take you down. And the giant goes, no. Leave me alone, boy. Go away. Go away. You bother me. And it was David who destroyed Goliath. Took his head with his own sword after he had knocked him down. Underestimated David. And he measured up. He measured up to be exactly who the children of God needed at that time. Who God needed at that time. And God does look inwardly. God searches the inward part of the heart. And that's what we're looking at. That's what we want to understand is the measure of the man. Back in the book of John in the 7th chapter in verse 24. Jesus challenges us to, by like means, look beyond the external and be careful with our judgment. So in John 7, verse 24, notice what's seen. Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. How often have we been guilty of that? Just kind of blanket judgment. We pass it on somebody. I know a lot of people in the religious world look at preachers, instructors, and look at the externals. And they go, this man has definitely got to be teaching truth. As I mentioned the other day, I went and had my eyes examined. Then went and had them fitted for new glasses. But as I was having my eyes examined, the ophthalmologist doing it was talking to me. He knows what I do for a living. And he said, let's see, now you're not preaching up on the hill, are you? And I go, no, I don't preach on the hill. Help me remember again where you preach. And I said, the Church of Christ on Winnetka. And he goes, this was what he said. Ew. Ew. I said, you ought to come by and see us. And then all he could talk about was Dudley Rutherford. Oh, Dudley this and Dudley that. And Dudley has this cut about it. And then he went in talking about Jack Hayford and Church on the Way. And he has this cut about him. And so what I finally went away from there saying, number one, I'm not going back to him again. Number two, it wasn't really the content of what they were teaching, but it was the aura that they began to communicate. And what we have to do is look deeper. Look for the truth. Linda was watching a movie last night, and in it, a woman got up during a church service at a clearly denominational church. And she asked a very valid question. How do I know which church is truth? And the preacher up there goes, well, that's kind of a loaded question. And I told Linda, I said, that's not a loaded question. That is the easiest question to answer. Because you don't look at the trappings. You look deeper. You begin to pull back the veneer. And you see what's being taught. You look at the heart and soul of the message. And is it found biblically oriented? Because that's what we want. And see, that's what God was basically saying with the selection of David. I want to look deeper. And I don't want all the trappings. I want to look at the true measure of the man. So by what do we measure one another? How do we look at the measurement of a man? And by man, I'm talking about mankind. Do we measure it by fame, by wealth, by position in the community? How? In Ecclesiastes, in the 2nd chapter, Solomon goes through everything that he explored, as we've looked at on Sunday mornings. And we talked about all that Solomon did and all that he had. And you sit back and you stand in amazement of all that Solomon had. He talks about ponds of water. They're lakes back in that day and time. He had orchards, vineyards. He had professional entertainers who entertained him. He collected gold and silver and all sorts of things. He had it all. But he said, you know what? Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. He said, when you come to the final analysis, all of that is just empty. It is not who man is. It is what man has. Tracy Chapman, interesting folk singer. She sang a song now 25, 30 years ago. And I realized that, it is a song. But she said, all that you really have is your soul. And, we could get into a discussion of the soul and the spirit and so on. But what she's talking about is all you really have is who you really are. It's not about, and she goes, not chasing after the silver dollar. It's not trying to get this more and that more. It's being a person of character, of principle, of alignment. And when I start to get a little bit full of myself, I'll listen to that song. And I appreciate it. Because it brings me back and helps me to center. Because invariably, when I do, I also turn over to the book of Ecclesiastes, the 5th chapter. And I drop down into verse 15. As he had come naked from his mother's womb, so he will return as he came. He will take nothing from the fruit of his labor that he can carry in his hand. This also is a grievous evil. Exactly as a man is born, thus will he die. So what is the advantage to him who toils for the wind? The measure of the man is more than the accumulation of things. A lot more. And we put the stock in that. We put a lot in that. Whoa, he's got to be this because of that. There's a bumper sticker. Life is a game. the one who dies with the most toys wins. No. If you got a whole bunch of toys, you're going to give them to your kids. You're going to give them to those that are here. You can't take anything with you. So you may accumulate everything. But when you die, what have you got? Look at Luke, the 12th chapter. And in Luke, the 12th chapter, I want you to drop down into the 15th verse. Luke 12, verse 15. And he said to them, beware, be on your guard against every form of greed. For not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions. Oh my, greed. Greed consumes us all. So we need to be very careful of it. And Jesus himself now is touching on it, because he asked the question in another place. For what will a man profit if he gains the whole world, forfeits his soul? So if I accumulate a veritable cornucopia of things, baubles, trinkets, money, stocks, bonds, portfolios, and when I die, what do I got? I don't have those. Somebody else has got them. And Solomon, in the 2nd chapter of Ecclesiastes, basically said the same thing. I'm going to entrust those to somebody that's not as smart as I am. Albeit Solomon had a little skewed vision of himself. But that's what he's saying. I've got to give it to somebody else who never worked, who never labored. They're going to be handed this. What are they going to do with it? They're going to go through it like you figure out some kind of an analogy. They're going to go through it so quickly. So quickly. And what am I left with? I'm left with who I am. All the trappings have been stripped away from me. And now this is who I am. I can't fall back on my looks. I can't fall back on my physique. I can't do that. I can't fall back on my charm. I can't. Because as I pass over that threshold, all that I have is what's inside of me. The psyche and the pneuma. And God divides between the psyche and the pneuma. And his word does that. And then I'll stand before the God of heaven. And I've always been told, as all mankind, that God looks at the inner man. And all the other things are really of little, if no importance. It's emptiness. It's weariness. Ecclesiastes 2nd chapter, verse 26. In the 4th chapter, verse 4, Solomon talks about how we're in competition one with another. We refer to it as keeping up with the Joneses. I don't know who the Joneses are. I know who lives next door to me on one side and on the other. I know who lives across from me. I know Ricardo, a doctor, lives next door. I know Oscar lives across the street, and I know what he does. I know Roxy and her family live across. I know what she does. You know what? I'm not in competition with any of them. Roxy drives a super big, giant Hummer. Ricardo's got 3 or 4 Mercedes-Benz and a couple other cars. The people next door to me, they got all these big trucks. I drive a Kia. That's all I drive. That's what I've driven for the last almost 20 years. Kias, one right after the other. You'd think they would give me a vacation somewhere. Put me on a commercial. How many Kias you own? I've owned 10. I guess that doesn't interest me. but we're not in competition with one another. We're not. I'm really glad that Brittany's going to go get her master's. I am proud of her. I'm not in competition with Brittany, and she's not in competition with anyone else. And it doesn't matter how many letters you have behind your name. It doesn't matter. Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau, said, and this is back in the 1800s, we have become janitors of our possessions. And that we have. I put out a daily thought just for fun. And this past week, I put out a daily thought about dust. And you get up and you dust all your stuff, and you do this and you dust. And there's fun things to do and enjoyment to do. And you can do this and you can do that. But no, you're dusting, you're doing this. And then ultimately what you have to figure out, same thing Solomon figures out in the 12th chapter. That when you pass from this life, you do something. And that is you leave more dust behind. Dust. And we're so captivated with our possessions. Is that the measure of a man? And the answer is no. That's not who we are. That's not what we want to be. Look at the 13th chapter of Hebrews and drop down about verse 4 or 5. Hebrews 13, 5, excuse me. Let your character be free from the love of money. Now, money is neither good nor bad. It's simply a tool. But if you got an inordinate love of it, you got some problems. And that you could have whether you have a bunch of money or whether you have no money at all to speak of. What am I willing to do to get money? It's the love of money. That is the root of all sorts of evil, Paul would write to Timothy. Being content with what you have. For he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I forsake you. A while back, I was commenting to Linda, I believe. And I said, we've really been fortunate. We've really been fortunate. I left the secular world to go into preaching. And we have never been at want for anything. We've been well taken care of. And I praise God for that. Have we gotten rich? No. But that's okay. Because we're rich in other things. And I was telling her, I can't remember the last time I went to bed hungry. And how content I am. I fully appreciate all that God has provided for me. And I realize that he wants me to look deep into myself and to become the man that he would have me and want me to be. But we get caught up and we get slurped in by our accomplishments. We ought not to do that. Linda asked me to put up a me wall. Me. I said, I don't want to. She said, but you went to school and got all these things. Yeah, I did. But they don't have any cachet to them. Huh? Yeah, maybe if I'd gone to Harvard and Yale, or if I'd gone to Columbia when they offered me a scholarship, yeah, maybe then. But no. I went here, I went there, I went this place. And I got my degrees from American University, Southwestern. But I didn't get it from Oregon. I mean, yes, I went. I got credits there. But she said, no, you need to put it up. And so out of compliance, they're up, but they're on a shelf. And they're hidden away. Yeah, I got letters behind my name. But those things don't mean anything. Not one thing at all. Our accomplishments, they're nice. They're nice. It's great. John was an engineer. It's great. But they're just accomplishments that last for a little while. Paul said in Philippians, the 3rd chapter, verse 4 through 8, they're but rubbish. And Paul had reason to brag. He goes through and lays out what he did, what he had accomplished. He said, but when I look at those things, it's but rubbish in contrast to where I need to be in my relationship with God. So what Paul was doing in Philippians was something really, really marvelous. Because what he was doing was laying out how man views people. And he said, from every standpoint, man should look at me and should go, whoa. And Paul said, no. Maybe at one time I felt that way. Not any longer. Because what I want is what God wants from me. Am I the person God would have me to be? So I consider all those things rubbish in order that I may become the man that God would have me to be. So we fill out resumes. And when we fill out a resume, we want it to look so good. So good. And we're taught, have an action word before each bullet point. And, have this running history of what you've done. God said, I don't want your resume. I know what you've done. And I'm going to tear all that aside to look at who you really are. Who you really are. Linda has long said she doesn't understand how a congregation can pick somebody to come and work with them just on a weekend of them being there. I agree with her. It would be hard, really hard. Because when that person comes, they're going to have sent out a resume. They're going to be on their absolute best behavior. You're going to look at the trappings, but are you going to see the real person? That's difficult. Very difficult. And so what I'm challenging each one of us to do is to look at ourselves as God would see us. See, Nebuchadnezzar had to be made aware of who he was. We don't have time to go back into Daniel, but I would encourage you to read Daniel, the 4th chapter, 19th verse and following, and see what God did to Nebuchadnezzar. Because Nebuchadnezzar had gained ascendancy. He was the leader of arguably the greatest nation on the earth at that time. And he would always talk about I. All that I did, all that I've accomplished. I. He would not give God any credit, give God any glory. So God goes through Daniel. Well, you're going to be relegated out into the field. You're going to be like an animal. And you're going to be there until you come to your senses. So commentators suggest that between 12 and 18 months is how long he was out in the field. His fingernails had grown like talons. His hair had grown like eagle feathers. So an eagle feather is roughly 12 inches long. Your hair grows at roughly 3/4 of an inch to an inch a month. So he's been out there a while. Finally, he comes to his senses. Then he acknowledges God. He moves away from polytheistic thought to monotheism, at least to a degree. And it was no longer I, but I looked to God. And that's what we need to do. Our greatest accomplishment is whether or not we've served the God of heaven. That's the greatest thing of all. All those other things are of no consequence whatsoever. Next week in our class in Ecclesiastes, we'll get into the 11th verse down through the 14th and conclude the book. Then move over into how to live over in the book of Proverbs. How to live, because one day we're going to stand before God with all the trappings pulled away from us. There's going to be no me wall. There's going to be no whether or not I ever attained to a Rolex or whatever. If I ever could afford a Ferrari, and I don't really want one, I kind of like Kias. They're unpretentious. And they got a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. Squeal of a deal. But all the trappings that we have, they're not going to mean anything. Whether or not you're a servant of God is what's going to mean. That's what we want to stand for. So the measure of a man is your proven character. Absolute proven character. The type of person. The conversation of your life. Who are you when the lights are off and you're there by yourself? Who are you when no one else sees? Are you all image or are you substantive? And which one holds more value? Image holds no value. Holds none whatsoever. I know a lot of people that are in the public relations field. And what they do is they spend time polishing the image of personages or corporations, when the real thing they should be doing is substantive changes. Change who you are and let the image of Christ be seen in you, in what you do, with your attitudes, your values, your principles. There's an interesting story that came out a few years ago, and I ask for your indulgence just for a minute. There was a box of crackers that a woman by the name of Deborah Rogoff bought from a grocery store. And when she bought it, she found out there was $10,000 in the box. And she thought, well, this is kind of strange. She lives in Irvine, California, lived in Irvine, California. And she was curious how the $10,000 got in there. And why would somebody leave that money there? So she went back to the store because she said, this has got to be somebody's money. Has to be. And they took it back to the store and turned it in. A few days later, somebody at the Whole Foods market, an elderly lady, came in, distraught. She had mistakenly returned a box of crackers, and she had put the money in the box of crackers. And she didn't know what to do. The manager of the store told her it was all fine and well. It's all okay. Gave her back the box of crackers. The elder lady was beside herself. But what caused this story to hit the AP wire is that older lady never even offered a reward. Never said anything. No thank you, no nothing. And when the story broke, they talked to the woman who had found the money and taken it back. And what she said, let's see, where is what she said? can't find it here real quickly. Well, the type of crackers was anti sour cream and onion cheddar bunny crackers. Sounds good right now. But what Rogoff basically said was, we didn't do it for the money. We didn't do it for reward. It was the right thing to do. Nobody would have ever known, had she not been honest. That is character. That is principle. Amen. And that is the type of people we want to be. People of character, people of principle, people of substance. And I know right now you're sitting there going, well, what would I have done if I'd found 10 grand in a box of bunny crackers? I'd have thought, woohoo, lucky day. But in the back of your mind, you go, yeah, something's not right here. Something's not right. Would you have taken it back to the store? And I would like to think you would have. And I would like to think you wouldn't have held the older lady, in disdain because she didn't offer you a reward. Didn't even say thank you. Didn't even ask who turned it back in. Didn't ask anything. Just because somebody is selfish and self-absorbed does not give you the right to view them in any way of a negative ilk. See, that's being somebody of substance. Image is that which glitters, and all that glitters is not gold. And that's why God looks at the heart, looks beyond the mere externals, and looks at who we are. Our time's just about up, but real quickly, go back into 1 Peter and go into the 3rd chapter of 1 Peter. Drop down with me into verse 3. And I realize he's talking about wives and so on, but I think it holds true. And let not your adornment be merely external, braiding the hair, wearing gold jewelry, putting on dresses. Now, of course, men go, oh, that doesn't apply to me. Look at the next verse because it does. But let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God. That transcends. So men, it's not always your clothes. It's not always the cut of your hair, the trimness of the way you look, the shoes that you wear. It's got to go much deeper. It has got to be the hidden person of the heart. And as we looked at earlier, the real issue is whether or not you've aligned your life with the God of heaven in a manner consistent with his word. So how do you want to be measured? What do you want your legacy to say about you? What is and what will be your legacy? As for me, I want it to simply be, he was a Christian. He did what was right. That's what I want my legacy to be. Amen. Nothing more, nothing less. I don't have a great stock portfolio. We don't have $1.5 tons of money. We don't own our home. We don't. But what we do have, nobody can touch. We have a relationship with the God of heaven. And I need to continue to develop that. Because that's where God looks, at the heart. So that's the measure of a man, as seen from God's word. And why Samuel was told, you anoint David. Don't look at the externals. Look deeper. So your challenge is to look deeper. Look inside yourself and see where you are in relationship to God. And if you're here and subject to the invitation anyway, we'd love to assist you in your rendering obedience to the God of heaven by putting Christ on in the waters of baptism. If you need the prayers of the congregation for strength or encouragement, be glad to assist you therein as well.